Hey everyone, I'm back with the video I've been teasing for a couple of months. In 1991, with the help of Jerry Weist, Sotheby's, the big auction house, launched the first kind of big comics auction, like official auction. People had been auctioning comics via mail, etc. But this was, gavel and a hardcover catalog and hors d'oeuvres and drinks and the whole deal. So, yeah. And yeah, this catalog, this is that catalog. I got this copy for Christmas in 1991, if you can believe that. It's a hardcover, and the material in this catalog is, to put it mildly, incredible. The movers and shakers in the hobby were clearly excited to put their best foot forward for Sotheby's, and with the exception of the lack of like a high-grade, unrestored Action 1 or Detective 27, which Sotheby's would bag later, they really did. They delivered some incredible material, and it's really a capsule of what the hobby looked like in 1991. So there's some emerging trends that you see, and then there's some kind of long-term trends that were kind of dying out, but were still an important part of the hobby. And so I've broken this video, with that in mind, I've broken this video up into two parts. The initial video is going to go over some key lots that illustrate that, right? The end of kind of the first era of collecting and the birth of another era of collecting. Now, we've obviously had more than two eras, but you'll see what I mean when I go through the video. The second video will just go through, as I often do, we'll just go through a ton of comics that I think are cool, ton of original art that I think is cool, and just talk about it and talk about the value and some of those sort of things. So that one will be pretty long. This one will be maybe a little shorter, and I'm going to post that one. I'm going to record that and post that shortly after this first video goes live. As a note, I've got the prices realized for this auction available, link in description. If you've dealt with any of these catalogs before, sometimes you can buy them off of eBay and you get lucky and there's a little results sheet in there. But oftentimes there's not, so you really can't know what some of these things have sold for. You've seen that in videos before. I just had no idea whether or not something sold, what it sold for, etc. So this one, I have provided the prices realized as a blog post, and the link is in the description. As a note, if you've got any of the prices realized for any of the Sotheby's, Christie's auctions, please reach out, drop me a comment or send me an email. You can find my email address pretty easily, because I'd love to be able to share those with the hobby. Initially just as kind of printouts, but eventually I would digitize them so that they'd be searchable. We'd have a searchable database of the comic auctions in the 90s, some of which were very important, and some really incredible, important books came out in those auctions, and it would be nice to be able to track those prices as well as tracking, the stuff that's in GPA and Heritage's archives and things like that. So, with all that out of the way, let's get into it. The first lot I'm going to talk about, lot number 24, Hal Foster Tarzan Sunday page from December 6th, 1936. Presented to Bern Hogarth, of all people, by King Features, to study after Hogarth was named successor to Foster on the Tarzan strip. The estimate was $8,000 to $12,000. It sold for $8,800. This single Sunday page was presented as prominently as you could be. It was a single lot, single item lot. In the context of 1991, that made sense. This was still a vital part of the hobby, especially to show the breadth of the hobby, right? So strip art from the 30s was still something that we thought about a lot. It made sense that this was highlighted. So there was, at that point, there was a significant kind of leftover glow around Hal Foster. Hal Foster is amazing. I love his work. But his place in the hobby has slipped significantly, certainly since the 90s, but definitely since the 60s. In the 90s, it was already slipping. And in 2025, it's sad to say, but he's probably unknown to a large number of comic collectors. He didn't do comic books. He didn't do superheroes. He did strip art, adventure strip art in the 30s. Compare that kind of mind share that he has, compare that to the early days of the hobby, and it's like night and day. In the 60s, love for Foster was still very strong, and it basically trumped everything. The connection to Hogarth as well is probably lost on a lot of people today, although Bern Hogarth has an advantage over Foster in kind of modern relevance because his prominence in the art world. as an instructor, and he wrote textbooks basically on figure drawing. His dynamic figure drawing and the associated system are one of the primary construction systems for drawing anatomy, like off the top of your head. And actually, in terms of like the prominence of this page, in addition to the artist, it should also be pointed out that Tarzan is nowhere near where he was in the 30s in terms of pop culture significance. So it really doesn't help this page out. With all that in mind, this page sold for $13,085 in November of 2007. So it didn't quite double its money in 16 years. That's a pretty flat result, and not typical of the lots in this auction at all. Running values for this page through to today, we can guess the high at Heritage, at least, which is where I can get searchable information on original art most easily. The high is $45,000 for a Foster Tarzan page. Foster, in 1991, Foster and Tarzan were still benefiting from the memories of like kind of that original wave of collectors who pushed Foster's work up to the top of the hobby. That benefit had already started to fade in 1991. Superheroes had really taken over. And that trend clearly accelerated over the next couple of decades. Superheroes really just rule the roost right now, with some exceptions, but, strip art from the 30s is not like one of the top categories. And that's a shame, really. If you look at Foster's work, it's amazingly good. There's a reason he was worshipped in the early years of the hobby. I would check out some of his work if you haven't. There's a ton on the Heritage archives. You can look at it, zoom in, and just see how fine his work was. Really amazing, especially the Prince Valiant stuff. I love that. And then we have the opposite of that. Lot 287 was the complete artwork for Amazing Spider-Man 31. Just let that sink in. The issue introduced the world to both Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn. It's a very significant issue. I mean, that's a really big deal. The estimate was $20,000 to $25,000. It sold for $24,200, which seems insane, even in the context of 1991. $24,200 is not even 3 Hal Foster Tarzan Sundays. We just saw one of them sell for $8,800. I'll ask the question, what would you rather have? 20 pages of Steve Ditko art from one of the most significant books in his Spider-Man run and one of the most significant Spider-Man books from the Silver Age, or 3 Hal Foster Tarzan Sundays? I mean, value-wise, it's not even a question, right? But value aside, I'm sure there are some people who would rather have the Foster stuff. The Foster stuff is beautiful. But, I mean, in terms of value, it's not even close. 3 Foster pages would basically be like, I don't know, $125,000 maybe. Let's give it 150. Let's say 150. The splash would be, 2 to 3 times that, right? We're talking $200,000, $300,000 for the splash page alone. I mean, even when the book was broken up at the August 2006 Mastro Americana auction, it had already increased nearly tenfold from the 1991 sale, selling for just over $202,000. Considering the growth in the original art market since, it's fascinating to think about what this book would sell for now. The context of 1991 is weird to our 2025 vision of the hobby. Silver Age art was just starting to become a thing at that point. In the 80s, for example, I was literally just gifted a Gene Colan Daredevil page while I was working at Superhero Universe because it was seen as basically not worth selling. It was definitely worth selling when I sold it for nearly $5,000 through Comic Connect a few years ago. Things were getting better in the early 1990s. Original art was a bigger part of the conversation, but it was nothing like we see today. This insane lot represents kind of the roots of the current original art market. Stuff was starting to be brought to market. Really interesting pieces were starting to be brought to market, and the importance of the original art was starting to be recognized. Again, nowhere near where we're at now, but it was the start of it. By the way, shout out to Gene Park for hooking me up with details on the 2006 sale, including the total for the 20 pages, which I didn't have. Those Mastro catalogs are great, but MastroNet is gone. The archives are gone. I can't get historical information very easily on their auctions. And that number really helps to tell the story of the original art market, right? We have 3 waypoints, $24,200, $202,000, and then whatever it would be worth right now, $2 million, $3 million plus, who knows? It tells a very clear story of the maturation of the original art side of the hobby. I'm going to drop a link to Gene's Comic Art Fans in the description. He's got a great, like, very thoughtful collection, and you should check it out. You can find, while you're on Comic Art Fans, you can find many incredible pages, including this one, an incredible historic page which introduces both Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy. It doesn't get much better than this. Lot number 29, more Hal Foster 1960s Afterglow. A very fine copy of feature book number 26, estimated at $300 to $600. It did not sell. This nice copy of a reprint book from 1941 was presented by itself as a single item lot. At one point, why, you might ask? Well, at one point in the 1960s, this was one of the most valuable books in the hobby, as it features the only original art Hal Foster ever did for comic books, the cover of this strip reprint book. For context, a CGC 8.0 sold for $720 in 2019. Suffice it to say, no copy of feature book 26 would make it into a heritage signature auction today. It's a weekly only book. That this book was presented by itself is actually pretty crazy, even at the time. No one cared about this book in 1991. I didn't know what it was. It was not on my radar, and I was a comic dealer. I worked in a comic shop. I had a decent collection at that point, and I didn't even know what this book was. I mean, I wasn't as esoteric a collector as I am now, but still, I should have at least known about it. In fact, it had only maybe doubled or tripled in value since the 1960s. It sold for like hundreds of dollars in the 60s and was selling for $300 to $600 in 1991. In that same time, Action Comics #1 had gone from hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars to tens of thousands of dollars to soon hundreds of thousands of dollars in the same amount of time. So it far outpaced the increase in Prince Valiant, this Prince Valiant reprint book. I mean, I appreciate that they included it since it was an early part of the hobby's lore, but especially with our 2025 view of the hobby, it's crazy that this book, which most comic collectors have never even heard of, has a place of prominence in this catalog. With that Prince Valiant lot in mind, this lot is insane to me. I mean, even at the time it was weird, because, I was kind of a Marvel superhero nerd. Love Fantastic Four as much as I do now then. But let's talk about it. We had that feature book lot, which no one cared about and didn't even sell. And then you have this kind of mishmash of a lot of Silver Age titles, Marvel Silver Age titles that don't really go together. The connective tissue is that they're Silver Age Marvels. We'll just bundle them together. I don't know, right? Like the growth of like the art market, Silver Age comics were becoming a much more serious part of the hobby based on the power of the White Mountain collection, like in specific. But still, this is just so funny to me. Lot 292 is the White Mountain copies of Amazing Spider-Man #8, Fantastic Four #2 and 5, Fantastic Four Annual #1, and Strange Tales #110, 119, and 127. The estimate was $5,000 to $6,000, and it sold for $6,050. Let's look at the books in present context. Amazing Spider-Man #8 is a CGC 9.2. I'll talk about this book in a second. Annual #1 is CGC 9.0 and sold for $2,000 in February 2019. I'm not sure where. I don't have a scan to share. If you have one, let me know and I'll share it in a short. The Fantastic Four #2 is an incredible book, one of the most significant books in the FF run and like in the universe of collectible Fantastic Four comics. It's interestingly sold 3 times in 1 year. In 2012, it sold for $87,000 in February, $49,000 in July, and $90,000 in December. Whatever it did in that year, it's easily a $250,000 book right now. The Fantastic Four #5, one of my favorite books of all time, like this specific copy, CGC 9.4. It sold for $43,319 in July of 2012. The last 9.2 sold for $132,000 in 2024. So to me, the sky's the limit on this book. $250,000, $300,000, $350,000. I don't know. It's a very attractive book. The Strange Tales #110 is an old holder 9.2. I've talked about it before. I'll drop a link in the description where I talk about it. It just sold for $22,800 in November of 2024 at Heritage. The other 2 Strange Tales haven't shown up in GPA, so I don't know what they've graded at. Let's take a look at the books we do have scans of. the fun part. There's actually a mystery with this ASM number 8, right? So there's the 9.2, which I have a scan of and I've shown here, last sold at Comic Link in December 2021 for $4,763. It previously sold for $2,300 in December of 2005. In the middle, there's a CGC 9.4 White Mountain in GPA that sold in February of 2010 for $7,601. But the 9.2 in Comic Link is still in the same old holder. So there's no chance that this 2010 copy is the same copy, like, upgraded to a 9.4 and then downgraded and graded again, right? So it's two separate books. I don't know of dupes in the White Mountain collection, so I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. I might actually write to GPA because they can figure out like where it sold, even when there's not a link. They know where the data came from, so they might be able to tell me, and I can do a little bit of research. There can obviously be dupes in any pedigree, but this isn't like Boston where we know that there are stacks of certain books, right? There are multiples of certain books. We know that for a fact. I don't know of any examples in the White Mountain collection, but, I haven't done my deep dive in the White Mountain, so maybe I'll find out that there were dupes of certain books, and I'll answer that question. We'll see. Nice looking book, though, for sure. The number 2 is a CGC 9.6, Fantastic Four number 2, Versus Scrolls. So cool. And one of my favorite books in the hobby, like I said, specific copies. CGC 9.4, Fantastic Four number 5, White Mountain, first appearance of Doctor Doom. I've held this book. I've seen this book in person. Doug Schmel of Pedigree Comics brought it along with his CGC 9.6 copy of Fantastic Four number 1, the copy now owned by Tom Berlato, to Wizard World Philly 2004, the CGC Forum dinner. That was a fun night in general. Those CGC Forum dinners back in the day were great, and Doug brought treats. So I've talked about it. I'm a little nervous about this book in the old holder. It's a really attractive book to me. I really like White Mountains, obviously. I like Doctor Strange. I think this would be a cool book to own. But it's fascinating. This is the book they show in the auction listing. They talk about, like, hey, this Strange Tales 110 is really important. Not the first Doctor Doom. I don't know. It's interesting the way that they presented this material back in the day. Obviously, we've changed since then, so it's not fair to look at it with our current eyes, but it is funny to look at it with our current eyes. Carl Barks, Mardi Gras Before the Thaw, original painting, lot 2019. It carried an estimate of $150,000 to $200,000. This was a new painting. The lithograph was released in 1992, so it had been painted in maybe 1990 or 1991. This is the high estimated lot in the entire auction. Again, $150,000 to $200,000. This is very similar to the Foster lot. Carl Barks, who is still beloved and is someone whose comics I've collected myself. I love Four Color 386 and have owned a few copies over the years. But Barks was absolutely a dominant topic in the hobby in the 70s and 80s. If you look back at those old price guides, the market reports that Overstreet would write, and many market reports from individual Overstreet advisors, there'd be sections discussing Barks' lithographs and his original paintings. During that period, Barks was active, creating new paintings and lithographs, and there was a strong market around that activity. I was around at the time looking at those price guides and reading those market reports, so I understand. But if you're newer to the hobby, it might be a little surprising. But that's where we were. There's actually been a huge negative shift for this material in the past 30 years. How much? Well, this lot didn't sell. The estimate, again, was $150,000 to $200,000. And I don't have enough knowledge of Barks' work to place this one in terms of quality or historic value or whatever. But the record for a Barks painting at Heritage is $264,000 set earlier this year. That's not, the entire record of every Barks painting that's ever sold. I don't have access to that. It's not something I follow. But that is some context. And $64,000 more than the high estimate for this lot from 1991. Things have certainly changed. Example of things having changed. Lot number 295, complete X-Men number 1 original art, estimate $40,000 to $60,000. It sold for a meager $44,000. At the time, there was a lot of consternation amongst old-timers and traditionalists doing hand wringing and complaining that this lot was even included in this auction. It was new art, but unlike Barks, wasn't vetted by the masters of the comics universe in the same way as a Barks painting. This was a really hype-filled era. It was leading to Image, etc. It didn't seem like, serious enough or whatever. That Barks painting didn't sell, and this lot represents one of the most important artifacts in the hobby. 37 pages, 4 double-page spread pinups, and the cover to the biggest-selling comic book of all time by one of the true legends of comics, Jim Lee. I want to know what you think. What do you think this would be worth right now? Give me some info in the comments. Give me your best guess. You can break it down. What are the pinups worth? What's the cover worth? What are the pages worth? If you've got a copy of the book and you want to look through and figure out which the most valuable panel page or splash page would be, I'd love to hear that too. I don't actually have a copy of this handy. I'd have to go to storage to get one. I may, because thinking about it has made me want to take a look at it from that context. But I want to hear what you think. It's a fascinating exercise to go through the value on this thing, starting from $44,000 to where we're at now. It's certainly in the millions, but how many millions? I've got another one here that I want to hear from you guys about. I've talked about this a lot previously in the context of the Barks painting to show the divergence of values between Barks and Frazetta in the last couple of decades. Lot 308 is the cover to Vampirella #1 by Frank Frazetta. The estimate here is $40,000 to $50,000, 1/3 to 1/4 the estimate of the Barks painting, which, considering how many $1 million Frazetta art sales we've seen over the past few years and where the level is for Barks, it's kind of crazy. It's really is preposterous. But I'm not here to talk about that again. I've already talked about that. This time I'm going to go, in another direction and look at this art in the context of like the artist's vision versus comic art as a historic kind of pop culture artifact. What do you mean? You're asking. Well, here, the comparison here is I took it from a site called Muddy Colors. Link in the description for the full article. As you can see, the printed cover on the left had Vampirella in costume, because of course. The lot, as sold at Sotheby's, consigned by Frazetta himself, has the costume painted out. Frazetta said, "When I sold the original at auction, I undressed her. I thought that the costume was so corny, I painted it out, made her brazenly nude, and everybody loved it more." Okay, so whether or not everybody loved it more, it's no longer the published cover. The painting sold at Sotheby's is an original Frazetta, true to his artistic vision, but it's altered from the published version, which leads to the question, is it more or less valuable with, the overpainting, the brazen nudity? For context, this sort of overpainting is removed all the time in the kind of fine art world. People do poor corrections to something, they're trying to fake something, and you take away layers of paint and you can see the original painting underneath. It happens all the time. So the original is there to be restored. Would you want to see it restored? Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know which version do you think is more valuable. This sold for $77,000 at the time, well over the high estimate. But what would it have sold for at the time with the costume? What would it sell for now? How valuable would each version be? It's really hard to kind of think about, right? We're talking about a very valuable, iconic piece that's been altered by the artist. And I'm really interested to see what you think. Let me know in the comments. I'm also going to drop a poll for this one to see which one people think is most valuable. So at least we can get, thumbs up or thumbs down for one or the other. But it's a really interesting kind of thought experiment, right? Like to try and figure out, like, is Frazetta's vision more important, or is the artifact, the kind of record of the cover of Vampirella #1 more important? And there you have it. This was a lot of fun to put together, and the next video promises to be even more fun, as there are a ton of amazing comics and original art lots to look at. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, drop a like, give me some comments, especially about the Vampirella Image and the Jim Lee #1 X-Men original art complete book, which is insane. It's been fun, and I want to hear what you think about those two lots especially, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.